Gazing upon our world from a distance, it appears peaceful and calm. But the reality is far different. The repercussions of climate change are approaching us all, and we all contribute to this impact. By 2050, projections indicate that over 3 billion people will reside in various urban centers in the Asia-Pacific region alone. Urban activities are a key contributor to climate change. Cities are responsible for 75% of global CO2 emissions, with transport and buildings among the most significant contributors. And since 2012, the Asia-Pacific region has collectively been responsible for more than half of global greenhouse gas emissions yearly. The repercussions of climate change are imminent and befalling us all. Several Asian countries are among the top 10 countries most affected by climate change, with the Philippines ranked the 4th, India ranked the 7th, and Thailand ranked the 9th. It's time to act, and we have a joint responsibility to address climate change through urban development planning and design guided by climate data. That's where Urban Act comes in. Urban Act, or the Integrated Urban Climate Action for Low Carbon and Resilient Cities project, is a regional project that aims to support the transformation towards low carbon and resilient urban development and contribute to implementing each partner country's nationally determined contributions and the Sustainable Development Goals. Funded by the International Climate Initiative, or ICI, commissioned by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, or BMWK, Urban Act is implemented in 5 partner countries: China, India, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand, with a duration spanning 5 years from 2022 to 2027. We aim to achieve 4 critical outputs. These outputs include improving the institutional environment for climate-sensitive urban development, using evidence-based, inclusive, climate-sensitive, spatial and urban planning, identifying project concepts for urban climate action investment, and enhancing knowledge through regional networking, exchange, and learning. Our collaborative partnership comprises the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit GmbH, or GIZ, as a project leader, and the international partners consisting of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP, United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific, or UCLG ASPAC, the University of Stuttgart, and TU Dortmund University, and national partners in each of the project countries. To promote and showcase a sustainable integration of climate change into urban development, Urban Act implements its support in 14 pilot cities across the 5 countries, recognizing the unique context of the partner countries and aiming to improve the country's specific policies and regulatory frameworks. Furthermore, we engage in joint operations with the Indonesia-Malaysia-Thailand Growth Triangle, or IMTGT, implementing initiatives in 6 cities within the IMTGT sub-region. We are all standing on the edge, and every decision and action we take today will shape our future for generations to come. It is not just a choice, it's a collective responsibility that falls on each of our shoulders. It's time for us to unite and journey towards low-carbon, resilient urban development. Join us in the Urban Act, Joint Action for Climate-Friendly and Resilient Cities. We are stronger if we are together.
Dear participants, on the behalf of Urban Act Consortium, I feel delighted to welcome you all to the 12th webinar of Climate Conscious Cities, which is Urban Act webinar series. And the title of this webinar is COP29 and the Future, the new multilateralism for climate action. I'm Ashita Sharma, Cities and Climate Change Technical Advisor at UN ESCAP. And this topic has gained immense interest with the recent developments in Baku during COP29. And this interest is reflected well in our number of registered participants for today's webinar. For today's webinar, we have more than 175 participants who have registered, and this is the 12th webinar of the series, and the main objectives of this series are to increase the understanding and knowledge of the participants to build integrated climate action for low carbon and resilient cities, and to communicate and raise awareness for key innovations and emerging topics on action for low carbon and resilient cities, to build and enhance partnerships between Urban Act project and with relevant organizations, institutions, and experts outside the Urban Act project partners. Also to showcase the best practices, learnings, and innovations from Urban Act project to the wider audience and enhancing the profile of the Urban Act project. So before we go ahead with the current webinar, I feel delighted to highlight the e-learning opportunity, which is there for all participants. Urban Act has recently launched a free e-learning course on SDG localization and climate action synergies. You can enroll to this course using the shared link, which my colleague will be sharing in the chat box, or by scanning the QR code, which is displayed currently on the screen. Also, this webinar is the last webinar for 2024 series, but it does not stop here. The next series, which will come in 2025, will cover diverse range of highly relevant topics and will start in the February 2025. We are highly grateful to the participants who have filled up the survey for the suggestions. And the survey form is still open. You can scan the QR code and fill up your suggestions for 2025 webinar series. Also, as participants, you have noted that you were asked some questions that you would like to learn during this webinar. And thank you to all the participants who have responded to the questions. We hope that this webinar will serve as a learning experience for all those who are seeking to learn the new outcomes which have been developed in COP29. Also, this helps the organizing team and the expert speakers to make sure that the content is as relevant as possible. These questions are also fit to our intention that we want to deliver these webinars as a practical sessions which are driven by the inputs from our participants. Before we start with the expert presentation, some housekeeping remarks for the participants who have joined us online. Please note that this webinar is recorded and will be available on the social media and YouTube, and the slides will also be available on Urban Act Knowledge Platform. Also, please feel free to use the chat box during the webinar to interact with each other. And for specific questions to the expert speakers, please use Q&A function to write your questions to the panelist. Certificates of the participation will be available once you have filled up the survey form at the end of the webinar. So now, without taking much time, let's start the webinar presentations for today. And today we shall try to explore the outcomes of COP29 and its significance for the region and local governments. So it gives me immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Sangman Nam, our esteemed Director of Environment and Development Division at ESCAP, with extensive expertise in sustainable development and environmental policy. He has been at the forefront of addressing some of the most pressing challenges in the Asia and the Pacific region. His leadership and vision have been instrumental in advancing innovative solutions for inclusive and resilient development. We are grateful to him for sparing his precious time for this webinar. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nam. The floor is yours, Dr. Sangman. Secretary, maybe we can share the presentation.
Thank you, Ashita. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening for our participants. So I will make a brief presentation on outcomes and implications of COP29. As you know, each COP has a very diverse agenda items and decisions. So, but I wouldn't be able to cover all the elements, but I'm going to focus on more financing part, considering that COP29 was really recognized as a climate finance COP. And next slide, please. So for the preparation of this COP29, the COP presidency presented these two pillars of COP29. So first point is enhance ambition. As you know, now we are in the process for developing updated NDC. Officially, it is supposed to be submitted by first quarter of 2025, but it is very clear that most parties to UNFCCC wouldn't be able to submit that within next maybe 4 months, but it would be just before hopefully COP20, COP30. So this NDC 3.0 last COP really highlighted the point that it should be economy-wide. It should cover all GHG. It should be ambitious and especially in line with the latest stocktake assessment, and then so which means aligned with 1.5 pathways. And in that regard, so this is a really main point, but also considering the heavy impact we are experiencing in connection with climate change, this adaptation plans has been also highlighted in the context of enhancing ambition. And also we are moving into new transparency framework of UNFCCC, this biennial transparency reports. So some of our parties also submitted their first biennial transparency report. And then another important elements, especially with regard to the role of stakeholder groups, it is collaborative networks for complementary action. You may have seen the outcomes from last COP and previous COPs, which presented very diverse initiatives from the presidency of a COP. So this was certainly another important elements for the host of the COP. And then, but in order to enhance ambition, we do need tools to enable such actions. So in that regard, NCQG, which has been negotiated during last few years, new collective quantified goal on climate finance, it was supposed to be decided at this COP. And Article 6, which I will present here, the details, and loss and damage, which was agreed at the COP28. It was the speed of presenting that agenda item and mobilizing agreement was surprisingly. It took just about 1 year, and then but the level of contribution, committed contribution, is less than 800 million now, and so but loss and damage fund is just at the early stage of operationalizing it. Next slide. Okay, moving on. But before every COP, UNEP is presenting gap analysis report. Again, this year, this gap analysis report was presented before COP29. And despite our enhanced ambition, the point is, during last 2 years, actually the increase of GHG emission is higher than the average increase of GHG emission during previous year. So, except the a slight decrease during COVID, so we are still encouraging the GHG emission. Next slide. This is from UNFCCC's NDC synthesis report. So the agreement made at the last COP, COP28, was to reduce GHG emission by 43% by 2030 from 2019 level, and then 65% reduction by 2035. So that is agreed goal in line with the 1.5 degree Celsius pathway. But nevertheless, if we while we have an enhanced ambition between INDC and the current NDC, but still the level of ambition is still significantly low. That's one. And another point is whether even countries can really achieve their current goal in NDC. So we have two questions: the level of ambition and then the possibility of achieving current target in their NDCs. Next slide. And so for COP29 presidency, this Azerbaijan government, they really worked with the UN entities for initiating those are 14 presidential initiatives. And then there are 14 global initiatives, and then there are also 4 regional level initiatives. And UN entities, MDBs, so World Bank and many other international entities were invited to join from the beginning. So they really utilize the input from international and UN entities. And first one is Climate Finance Action Fund. So they try to, so this one, this is to mobilize voluntary contributions from fossil fuel producing countries and companies. So really, giving initially it was proposed to charge a certain amount per barrel from countries, but it became voluntary contribution from fossil fuel producing countries and companies. So, but nevertheless, so we have to wait and see the level of contribution. But it is also quite meaningful to really highlight the responsibilities, these financial responsibilities of those countries and companies. And then there are, and with regard to this more local action, I will move to next slide. And here, multi-sectoral action pathway, we call just a map for resilient and health cities. So this has been carried out from the previous COPs. So, but before moving on to next slide, I will also speak here some additional point related to cities, this methane reduction from organic waste. So last COP, COP28 made this new initiative on methane reduction from oil and gas sector. So it was quite important initiative. And then based on this, COP29 made this initiative on organic waste. So this is directly related to urban climate action. And okay, moving on to next slide. So this is the map. So I just mentioned, so this is built on 2 previous initiatives, COP27, Sustainable Urban Resilience for Next Generation initiative. And then last COP in Dubai, there's a coalition for high ambition, multi-level partnership, CHAMP, for climate action. So utilizing this, so Azerbaijan government, the COP presidency initiated this map for resilient and healthy cities. Here, the specific components of a map in terms of substantive areas, nature and health, resilience, technologies, job, building and construction, transport, and urban agriculture. So those are substantive elements for international partnership on the map, and then in support of those substantive areas. So they also include tools like planning, policy, science, finance, and collaboration. And then those means of implementation and thematic areas are supposed to be supported by international partnerships, stronger partnership, and then also building linkages. Here, if you look at the document, you can see the list of international meetings related to cities, including all the urban forums. So how to bring, well, we cannot really bring all together, but how to build linkages across global and regional platforms related to cities. Linkages and partnership and support climate action in those sectors identified here. Next slide. And then moving on to climate finance and security. So before this COP, there were already over 10 expert meetings, also minister level consultation, UNFCCC Secretariat conducted. And then from that, the document submitted to COP29 included those are two options. One is at least $1 trillion per year towards 2035. There are also some other options, $1 trillion or 1.1, 1.3, even $2 trillion was also mentioned. And then option 2, at least 100 billion, which is actually current goal, the goal until 2025. So there is a big gap between this option 1 and option 2. And then during the negotiation, as many of you know, that $200 billion was kind of agreed, proposed, especially by developed countries. But the current 100 billion goal is from developed countries to developing countries. But this $250 billion towards 2035 is without developed countries taking the lead. It doesn't mean developed countries take a full responsibility, but they are taking the lead and also mobilizing contributions from developing countries. And it is not only from the government, but wider variety of sources, private sector and philanthropies and many others. And then at the end, so the final negotiation was made on this 300 billion by 2035. In addition, also, again, same message. So without the developed countries taking the lead, that's the condition. And in addition to this 300 billion, also there is a Baku balance roadmap to $1.3 trillion. So during next 1 year, the COP presidency, both COP29 and COP30 will lead the consultation process on long-term finance towards $1 trillion. Next slide. So, but this NCQG is not only about whether 250 or 300 billion or $1 trillion. We also have to look at quantity and not only quantity, also we have to look at quality. So it is developing countries really raised their voice. The climate finance shouldn't create additional debt on developing country. So we need a more grant-based resources and highly concessional finance, and especially adaptation. And so that's one. And also how to really creating and expanding fiscal space for developing countries. So in that regard, so innovative instruments, as you can see here, first those instruments guarantee, especially this local currency financing to mitigate this foreign exchange risk. So those were also highlighted, spelled out in the document. And then again, so as I will show you, we have reached the 100 billion goals, but the issue is where did that money go? What's the the level of financing made to LDCs and Cs? So this is another point. And then in order to enhance transparency of global climate finance, from 2028, we will have this biennial report on qualitative and quantitative consideration. Yeah. Also looking at the specific information on financing for LDs and Cs. Next slide. And so last COP28 really celebrated that we finally reached the goal of $100 billion. So almost 120 billion. So that was a very symbolic, and then it continues. So this is one point. And then as you can see, quite a bit of funding also from this private sector. The top part is private sector. So it's not only from the public. And then also you can see this bilateral and MDBs. So almost equally shared by bilateral donors' contribution and multilateral donors' contribution. Next slide. So this kind of a global financing is one, but we also have to look at other dimensions of finance. So this shows that not only official kind of this ODA, those channeled through OECD, DAC, Development Assistance Committee reported there, but looking at more overall annual global climate finance. So COP28 document spelled out the gaps that we have, which is about $5 to $6 trillion per year. But now current here, this shows that 21, 22, so annual climate finance is about $1.2 trillion. And then, so their latest assessment shows that about $1.5 trillion in 2023. So there is a rapid increase. And then as you can see on the right-hand side, this is equally shared by public and private investment. And then 85% of this global climate finance actually was made at the domestic level. So about 15% was international climate finance, but 85% was actually domestic climate finance. So in that regard, while we are looking at increasing global, the supporting developing countries, and also we need to look at how to innovate domestic climate finance. So at the end, most part of climate finance will be domestic. Next slide. So before and during the COP, there was heated discussion about who should contribute. And then at the end, the final document doesn't really elaborate any points on potential contributors, but the document submitted to the COP include these points. So the document shows that first and three groups of countries with a GNI per capita based on PPP, more than $52,000 that's about 40 countries. And then one of the top 10 emitters, and then plus $20,000. That is actually China. The document doesn't mention any country name. So I look at the GNI, and then so I found that this is China. And then the third group, per capita emission is 250 ton, and then the per capita GNI is $40,000. That's Russia, Poland, and Kazakhstan. So the discussion we're targeting this about 45 countries, but of course the next point is parties excluded from this criteria: low-income countries, LDCs with a low human development index, and countries in conflict. Next slide. And moving on to Article 6. So Article 6, Paris Agreement, has been highly emphasized in the context of climate finance because it really includes all those points, especially Article 6.2 and 6.4 are directly related to climate financing. Ashita, do I have still time? So let me know.
Maybe if we can take 1 to 2 minutes more.
All right, okay. So this Article 6.2 is trading between countries, and 6.4 is quite similar to CDM in Kyoto Protocol, and 6.8 is a non-market approach. So next slide. So I'll move. And so 6.2, this is a trade between countries, which is we call ITMO. So I will share the slide and you can look at it later. So transporting the emissions reduced by investing, your other partner country, and then you can get the emission in your country. Next slide. And in that regard, so this COP made a finally agreed on the detailed rules for operationalizing Article 6.2. So what is the authorization process, how to report, how to transfer, how to ensure transparency. Those rules were agreed. Next slide. And then here in Bangkok, we have the first case of ITMO. This 1,900 buses were converted into e-bus. And then from this emission reduction from this e-bus program was transferred, purchased by this Swiss agency. So for those who are working with cities and other industries, you can also look at this how this ITMO worked out. Next slide. And this carbon crediting mechanism, like quite similar to CDM. Again, this COP made cleared all the rules on monitoring and reporting and accounting, and so that this can be now really operationalized. Next slide. This is, I guess, final. The last slide. This 6.8. This doesn't involve this crediting. Even if you are contributing emission reduction in neighboring countries, but you are not going to get the credit. But it is more like a very traditional capacity building activities. But now this NAM, non-market approach platform is being launched. And those are not only governments and stakeholder groups, they wish to support, or if they wish to receive a support, they can put their information here so that the system will match those needs support, those who can provide their resources. So this is a platform for matchmaking. So please look at this NMA platform, especially local officials or could utilize this platform for identifying partnership activities. Next slide. Okay, let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sangmin. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and highlighting the documented outcomes of COP29, especially related to climate finance. I understand that participants may have a lot of questions related to the implications, especially related to the subnational framework. So maybe you can put up your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A link, and we will ask the questions to the experts in the Q&A session after the second presentation. So we move ahead to the second presentation of the day now, And I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Yunus Arikan, the head of Global Policy and Advocacy at ICLE. He's also the focal point for local government and municipalities to UNFCCC. And with decades of experience in international climate and sustainability policy, Mr. Arikan has played a pivotal role in shaping local government engagement in global climate agenda. His leadership in bridging the gap between local action and climate policy has been instrumental in empowering the cities and regions worldwide to drive the impactful change. So without taking much time, I hand over the floor to Mr. Yunus. Mr. Yunus, may you please proceed. Thank you.
Dear Ashita, thank you so much. First of all, for you and all the partners of the Urban Act Consortium for this kind invitation and very helpful progress in your project and enabling me to contribute in your discussions. I remember, I think we started the year at the January session, January webinar last year with the discussion on the outcome of COP28, and we are closing the year with this debate on the COP29 outcome. I'm very delighted to be part of both of these webinars. And I'm very, I have a privilege to contribute to this discussion after the presentation from our colleague from ESCAP, Mr. Nam. I think it made my life very easy. Therefore, I could focus a bit more on our own engagement. This slide has been built on the regular monthly briefings we are having in the LGMA constituency. So, and I remember some of the slides were used in the previous webinar in January. So I will not go too much on the details, but I will focus more especially relevant to those questions I received as well. Maybe just as a brief in the starting point, this photo you can see was in fact reflects the momentum or the spirit in Baku. So we had the mayors, the governors, and the LGMA experts. We had the SCUPA chair, the Algeria State Planning Committee, and Minister of Dubai, Minister of Environment, UN Habitat Executive Director, and Ambassador from Brazil, which is reflecting really the atmosphere we had. This was just outside the plenary where the third Urban and Climate Ministerial was held, and that was the moment where Mr. Nam has explained the multi-sectoral action partnerships for multi-sectoral action pathways for resilient and sustainable cities. The MAP initiative was launched together with the Baku Urban Continuum, which is aiming to ensure linkages between the previous COPs, but as well as World Urban Forum and World Environment Days. That was one of the uniqueness of that. Let's proceed to the next slides. As I said, these slides are repeating. We are a constituency engaging in the process since '95. And therefore, we have the advantage of building on our previous achievements. These slides we can just move quickly. Next slide is, in fact, is a list of our upcoming webinars, 12 to 2025 monthly webinars at 10 and 4 p.m., 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. European time. And we also have the monthly bulletins. And monthly bulletins is very valuable because, for example, at COP29, we had it daily. So I recommend all the participants of this webinar and this process, the meeting you're having, is also register yourself so that you can be updated regularly as well. Let's go to the next slide. This is nothing important, nothing different here. The 4 phases of the engagement of local and subnational governments. But of course, it's good to remember this because there will be discussions about whether Baku was successful or not. But let's remember, we still have decisions from previous COPs, and Baku, we were already aware it will be a transition COP from Dubai to Willem. So I think in that sense, delivered its mission. And therefore, it's important to note that we're not talking about only one event, success or failure, but it is really a process we're talking about. Next slide. This is, I think, still important because there were huge discussions how to acknowledge the commitments, especially in the discussions on mitigation, the ambitious. There were big difficulties among parties to acknowledge or honor their commitments in Dubai. But even if the texts, decisions are not very strongly, though they do not have languages, we will go to that one as well. They cannot ignore that these decisions are adopted, that there is a transition away from fossil fuel is a commitment. Tripling of renewable energy, doubling of energy efficiency, deforestation, different topics to bring to the climate debate is still something that we will build upon. And especially for us, the CHAMP initiative was very valuable, and that's what we should be. We will refer to it as well. Next slide as well. Let's go that. This, I think, would be the transition between the Emirates and Azerbaijan presidency, which is a cyclic process, as we discussed. This year, we are still, of course, enjoying this innovation from Dubai. There is the Troika. So the Emirates, the United Emirates, will not be leaving the process completely. They will still be involved in Troika. And one interesting thing, during the COP, Azerbaijan was, we believe, had a very wise strategy. In the middle of the negotiations, when the second week, when they were responsible for the drafting of the decisions, they announced clearly that there will not be a cover decision, and they invited UK and Brazil to lead the negotiations. What did it mean? What did this mean in practice? Azerbaijan, let's remember, they were announced to host the COP announced in the Emirates. So they prepared in less than 6 months a fantastic logistical preparation. And it was not a direct wish of Azerbaijan to host this COP, because this was a deal between Russia and European Union, because it would be the Eastern European countries to host that. And there were big political fights. So Azerbaijan was like forced to have this COP to be hosted in Azerbaijan because of being the neutral country. So in that sense, they have made it clear that they did not want to put a big footprint or stamp on the negotiations. Therefore, they were respecting that the main outcome will be in Azerbaijan, in Brazil. And they have made a very wise decision to bring UK on board, because the troika of COPs 28, 29, 30 does not include UK. UK was the host of the COP in 2021, COP26. So in practical terms, the Troika did not have an engagement of UK. And it was also, the three countries were all global south. So there was relatively an imbalance, because we all know that this is a consensus process. There should be engagement of global north and global south. So by giving an opportunity for UK to intervene in this process is a very wise decision, because it's also clear that a year later after Dubai, UK is now recognized as the most stable and most ambitious global north country. We have seen troubles with the EU, we have seen troubles with the US. They are all having difficulties because of their domestic issues. But UK, with the refreshed government, with a new mandate, with the progressive politics on climate action, I think Azerbaijan made a very wise decision to bring UK and Brazil on board in the design of both the 29 outcomes, but also paving the way for COP30. Let's go to the next one. This shows us that what we achieve in a year is equally shaped by what we have done during the year. It's really, we're talking about outside UNFCCC process like G7, G20, or inside the UNFCCC, there are so many meetings, workshops, meetings in Bonn, technical workshops, and we have our own LGMA positions, the technical meetings like our climate weeks, the local and regional climate weeks, or our process like Daring Cities. If we do not prepare ourselves, or if we do not interact with the countries through these processes, it's not possible to expect a meaningful outcome only in 2 weeks' time in Baku. So this was an intense year, because this was the super year for 3 Rio conventions, 1 World Urban Forum, as well as the UN Summit of the Future. So it was a very, very dense, intense year for global processes. And if you go to the next slide, this helped us to shape our what do we bring to the COP? That was the joint position paper of the LGMA constituency, which incorporates so many networks, national, regional, and global networks, many of them also coming from the regions that this project is working in. So we had shaped our expectations on three basic points: the multi-level governance, particularly in the implementation of the CHAMP initiative and paragraph 161 of the Dubai Consensus, which urges parties for multi-level action. We had a big discussion on integrated outcomes, how we connect land, nature, food, culture to climate action. And the third, of course, the multi-level finance, climate finance for local and subnational governments. Especially, we have discussed about our role in the big quantum goal, but more importantly, how this is dispersed. And we have particularly started a big debate on Article 6.8, which is the non-market approaches, knowing that market approaches has not been too much beneficiary or producing results for the local level. On first point on the multi-level action, I have to also acknowledge that over these months, since we announced this in Dubai, we had made a huge progress on the CHAMP endorsing countries. We have even increased new endorsers like Finland, like UK. They were brought to the table by their own local and regional governments, like City of Turku or City of Bristol, Scottish government, Wales government, so that the UK subnational actors and the Finnish subnational actors were extremely important. We also had made huge progress in the implementation, such as the associations endorsing the CHAMP, like in Germany, Brazil, and US. And we will discuss this because Brazil made a huge demonstration of bringing a remarkable second NDC, which recognized the role of the CHAMP initiative, and they termed climate federalism in their second NDC, which was presented during COP in Bonn, in Baku. One thing that may be important is that the 5 countries of this project, target countries, unfortunately, we only have Philippines involved in the CHAMP initiative. The 4 other countries are not yet involved. We had worked a lot with Malaysia, but we have not made progress yet. But we're also aware, even though they did not sign or endorse CHAMP, these 4 countries are also implementing a lot on multi-level action. Let's continue. These are the endorsing partners, a lot of cities and regions across the world. I think there are still regions, cities from the 5 countries, but I cannot recall immediately at this round, but you can continue. This is not the time that we will spend too much, but this shows, and the strong endorsement, maybe important point is that many subnational governments, both at home or when they are interacting in Baku, they use this. It was around 15-page document in its entirety, including a 2-page summary. Our messages were very helpful for our subnational leaders when they talk to their national governments or when they put pressure to their national governments. And this was also the document. This was also based our input to the negotiations throughout the 2 weeks of COP as well. Next slide. So how we engage in this process in Baku, we always focus on the blue zone engagement, especially in cities and regions where the local leadership is not so much active in their hosting countries. Baku was a fantastic host, but the Baku is still under the state machinery. So the SCUPA, our partner, was mostly the relevant one. So we did not have too much engagement in the green zone, but we were mainly on the blue zone, the official UN territory. We had interventions in numerous opportunities. We had statements in the plenaries with our press conferences. And we had our own opportunities to share our vision of what we expect from the negotiations. We have a pavilion, we will discuss about it, the Blue Zone, that was the home for our community. With presidency, the COP29 president, we had a fantastic collaboration. They have designed the Leaders Climate Action Summit. It was, of course, different in terms of the space and the capacity compared to Dubai, but we were very happy to have an urban side event, which was not easy. So at the Leaders Summit, there was an urban side event. We have to celebrate Mayor Sharif, Mayor of Kuala Lumpur, as the first local leader to address the high-level opening of the World Climate Action Summit. This was a remarkable moment because mayors do not necessarily have those chances to interact with the heads of state, but Mayor Sharif was addressing the UN leaders directly from podium. We had the MAP initiative and Baku Continuity Coalition as an outcome of the third ministerial meeting. And of course, we were engaged with Marrakesh Partnership because there was also continuity of these efforts. And we were involved in a number of events, such as introducing the new concept of informality. There were numerous pavilions. This year, logistically, the space was a bit smaller than Dubai. But it was still very dynamic, especially there are a lot of initiatives in this countries' pavilions so that they were opening space for local and regional governments. As far as I know, the 5 countries of this region were not that active in terms of their pavilions, unfortunately. This could be a point for next year's discussions. And we have particularly focused on several agenda items, and maybe go to the next slide. We should just highlight. So we have during this 2 weeks, our challenge was that it was a lot of people were not able to travel because of logistical and cost issues. So that we have made our daily mailers every day. You were able to receive a summary of what has happened in the previous day and what we were preparing for the next day. Our daily briefings were supported with our videos. We had press statements, press conferences, and our partnership with media partnership, Cities Today, was also an opportunity for us to communicate our updates. All of these, including the videos, the bulletins, documents, are available on our website, citiesandregions.org/COP29. Next slide. So there were around 70 or 80 decisions in this whole 2 weeks. Some of them are technical, some of them are political. We focused 5 most important ones. On the quantum goal, of course, the decision is to go to public finance from global north to south to 300 billion. And in total, together with innovative finance, it will be reaching to 1.3 trillion by 2035. We as LGM ask for trillions by 2030. So in that sense, it's not directly fulfilling our expectation, but therefore we believe this figure, both the 300 billion and the 1.3 trillion, should be floor, not the ceiling, so that the parties should increase these efforts. Maybe there should be one important thing. Last year, in our webinars, we have discussed about climate finance to cities. There was a latest data from the CCFLA that there's an annual finance flow to urban investments around 800 billion. This was by figures of 2022. And the expectation that this should be increasing to 4.5 trillions by 2030. But the point is, this figure includes only mitigation, and it's a figure for both north and south. So one of the biggest challenges of the climate finance debate is that it's worth comparing, unfortunately, apples and bananas. So we have to be very careful. On the mitigation program, we have throughout the year an important discussion on cities and buildings and urbanization. Mitigation work program was the most challenging process. For 2 weeks, there were huge discussions. There were resistance from some parties to acknowledge such a topic and its outcomes. We did our best so that this urban proposals, urban climate mitigation, should not be the victim of the big fight between geopolitics. We were successful that there is a substantial set of recommendations on how urban climate action can be part of the mitigation work program, although it's not all what we have asked for, but it was a good process. Therefore, especially when you listen to Mr. Nam, we have been having all these initiatives, but still they are not incorporated into the decisions, or they are not part of the official mandated events. So we did our best throughout these 2 weeks to put a mandated event character to this ministerials on urban and climate, because it's still an initiative of the presidency. We hope, especially with the Brazilian government, who is very active together with the Minister of Cities, we will make sure there will be an outcome for that. The high-level champions' mandate continues until 2030. That's a good news, and we want it to be improved as well. Adaptation roadmap, there are several indicators, but they are not too much referencing to locally led provisions in this indicator program, so that's why we are not so much happy. And most importantly, there were no decision on global stocktake, and this gives us the reason to really think about, because the global geopolitics is becoming very difficult, and we will make sure stocktake outcome complements at the local level, and that will be another slide in the next two ones. So let's continue into the next slide. Oh, sorry, these are all the website screenshots. You can go fast so that we don't waste too much of our time. Feel free to check our website, citiesandregions.org/COP29. Continue, please. So you can see all the links to our statements and webcasts and bulletins. Maybe the next slide is the screenshots of our engagement in the pavilion. We are grateful for our partners who have contributed, especially with the support from the Turkish and Azeri government and UN Habitat and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Next slide, please. This was an opportunity for us, really. When you are in the blue zone offering this space, you can empower your subnational leaders. This was one of the 6 screenshots where we had met colleagues from Maldives who had not been aware of us, but they found us at the pavilion. So that was the space where we would like to have more partners from your region. We were very happy to have Mayor Maimuna Sharif and others, and especially with Malaysian University of Technology in Malaysia. We also have a side event together. So we look forward to having more from your region as well. So next slide. I'm getting to the end, and the 3 main conclusions I would like to highlight that. First of all, there is a significant, we're feeling the impact of the Trump 2.0. The global solidarity is weakening, and the ambition gap and leadership gap is widening, especially in the global north. And that was the reason why the results are not as ambitious. It's not the fault of Azeris, but it was really the fault of global north. And we were very unhappy, because if we could have achieved some of the urban-related goals, this will be even better for COP30 presidency in Brazil, but they will have to redesign the discussions from the beginning. What we have seen is that when the global process gets weakened, the role of local governments for being a partner, especially for the parties in the global south, becomes even more important. So if there is no global money coming, the ministers of environment, ministers of climate who are responsible, or ministers of urbanization, they should look at their back home. Who is their partner? Their local and regional governments are their best partner. The initiatives like we have CHAMP and Town Hall COPs are important for us to prove that. And more importantly, we can expect more changes in the UN system and even UNFCCC system. It could be good or for worse. This could be meaning that there may be things that can improve, but there are also expectations that the whole UN system may go through some changes, because if the Trump administration position and the weakness of the global north continues, there may be resources and there may be legitimacy of the UN's processes. This brings us more responsibility. And overall, we're talking about in a 5 to 10 years time, the age of global multilateralism wouldn't be possible without an active engagement with local regional governments. That's the most important conclusion we have. Next slide. In that sense, we are building our efforts for an action at the national level. Town Hall COPs is a process that we encourage every city and region to come in once a year, which is a discussion with their communities about how they can contribute their local national contributions, and how they can bring this result to the UNFCCC, regardless of their government's position. And that we want to have examples from Asia as well. My last slide is that, in the sense that next year will be less in terms of global efforts, but a lot of work has to be done at the national level. In that regard, we would hope that will be more discussion in your cities and regions of this region as well. This concludes my presentation. I thank you for your time and happy for your questions if needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yunus. Thank you for key takeaways, especially related to LTMA. And now we open the floor for question and answers. And I can see there are some questions posted in our chat box. Maybe I'll ask, and whosoever feels comfortable in answering, they can answer the question related to the questions which have been asked. So there is a question related to the difference between Article 6.2 and 6.4 and how Article 6.4 helps in reporting and getting the carbon credits. I think, Dr. Nam, this
Yeah.
question is good.
As I mentioned, so 6.2 is really trading between countries. So trading between, and then 6.4 is between, it's if you look at CDM, Clean Development Mechanism under Kyoto. So there is kind of a mechanism that we are looking at under 6.4. And private sector and any entities, they can make investment in other countries, and they can also sell this credit in global carbon market. So, and then 6.8, as also Yunus mentioned, that this is, it doesn't involve transfer of credit, so non-market approach. And this also reporting of a credit is being reported on like a CDM. There was a coordination body, supervisory body that can monitor and register. So 6.4 will have also similar mechanism. But for UN side, we don't have actually much role to play in 6.4, but we are really looking at 6.2 because in order for countries to utilize this, they still need a capacity building and also capacity building program. So UNFCCC has been really working with the UN entities on capacity building on 6.4. And also I see a question from question on bus route of this e-bus in Bangkok. Actually, it's more than 120 routes. And Bangkok is initially planning to replace 4,000 buses by e-bus by actually this year, but it's not happening yet, it seems. But the current project involves only 1,900 buses.
Thank you, Dr. Nam. Thank you for, I hope this answers the query. Mr. Yunus, if you have anything to add on. And further, there is a question targeted to your presentation, maybe, that if there is any possibility for the cities to have autonomy in carbon markets in future, and how the developments in COP29 can accelerate local climate action through the sustainable finance.
Thanks for the questions. There are initiatives like Tokyo is implementing an urban emissions trading scheme, especially with the buildings. But this is not too much incorporated or connected to global carbon markets. It's much more really a territorial process. And there is also transition between Quebec and California. But beside these very ad hoc processes, there is not too much promising processes. Therefore, we are encouraging non-market approaches because let's think about this. If you think about a new Jakarta, that is one of the reasons that we are discussing. A new Jakarta is designed not by the mayor of governor of Jakarta, it's designed by the government of Indonesia in a totally different location. And this is not designed because it's huge investment. This cannot be just a market approach. That's why we really want to focus on these kind of non-market approaches, which is a planning process. But individual process can come up. There was a question about BRICS, and I remember one of the participants were also asking about the solidarity and trust between the nations. Let's be realistic. We are going through very difficult times, especially global north. The countries are, the results of the elections are bringing their national governments or regional governments to a position where they are not much anymore ambitious on climate action. I think the global south should start to think, how will this impact the climate action? The Paris Agreement enables you to go forward regardless of what the others are doing. And here, the big powers like BRICS, I think they should be starting to be more proactive rather than reactive. Let's remember that BRICS is controlling around 50% of the currency, global GDP. This year, South Africa will be the BRICS G20 presidency, and Russia will be the both COP30 host and the BRICS presidency. I think if these countries they really believe in sustainability, they should rely on their own resources, and they should bring progressive policies that it's not necessarily criticizing the West or the North, but rather put their own styles of the implementation and then bring others on board. We believe there are so many examples in China, like harmony with nature, and so many examples that could be enlightening for the rest of the world, like Africa or Latin America. So it's time for not to make anymore the others to act, but rather rely on your resources and believe in global solidarity. And we believe Progressive Cities actions will be a strong partner to these processes.
Maybe perhaps also I add additional point to what Yunus mentioned. Like the report from Global Landscape of Climate Finance, so $1.26 billion. Out of $1.26 billion, actually 860 billion was from, that's the climate finance in developing countries. So developing countries share more now climate finance. And then as I mentioned, so 85% of global climate finance happens at the domestic level. But when it comes to China, more than 95% of climate finance is all domestic resources. And many emerging economies are mobilizing their own climate finance. So, I mean, of course, global finance, I mean, especially finance from developed countries is important, but at the end, even if they enhance the ambition, but still it's a few drops of, rain in big river. So mobilizing, supporting, countries or cities own finance schemes is really critical. Also, that can help countries and cities make a more timely response, rather than waiting for many, many years to develop and implement the project.
Thank you. And that's true that cities need to mobilize their own resources, and they need to take action. And on the similar lines, that even if the cities get the funding or get the finance, there is generally not any supported mechanism within the cities to monitor GHG emission, or even if they have the mechanism, it is not as per the international standards. And some of the cities or some of the countries have their own mechanism to assess the or maintain the inventory. So how we can address that at the global level or at the regional level?
Well, now with this transparency, enhanced transparency mechanism, there is a clearer processes. I mean, details about what you need to report. Of course, it's a country level, but it needs to trickle down to city level. So really utilize the new guideline on the UNFCCC enhanced transparency framework. That's one. Also, in connection to this, IPCC developed their more detailed guideline on inventories, but that level of information might be too much. I mean, it's not possible for small cities to digest that level of details. So that's maybe perhaps the role of ICLEI and other intermediaries to make more utilizing them and then make a guideline and the system so that can be easily accommodated by cities. Yeah, but we have this global national framework, so this should be also translated into local level reporting.
Actually, this exists. We have a global protocol for GHG emissions, which is based on the IPCC, but at the place-based process. There is a detailed description of scope 1 and 2, and together with CDP, ICLEI is running the CDP ICLEI reporting platform, which is already used by thousands of cities around the world. Of course, there should be more. One of the things we are also expecting, maybe since you referred to IPCC has started to prepare the spatial report on cities in the 7th assessment cycle, and that will be concluded by 2027. One of the things that could come up, I mean, they have a format, but the 1.5 goals is really asking for transformation. And the current IPCC, the Kyoto Protocol logic of GHG inventories is only looking at the results, which is the emissions. We have to think about the root causes, which is consumption of goods, consumption of materials, which is a different logic. If you talk about the waste through the transported goods or food or cement that is transported across continents, in order to address this, we have a new and different set of accounting of our emissions, especially embodied carbon, which is discussed through the consumption-based emissions. And this is becoming very popular. If this becomes more a practice that across cities and regions, we can be more aware of where is the carbon emissions are going to, and especially through our consumption power, procurement power, both citizens and local governments can change this profile. We can adopt decisions, legislations which invests more in low carbon technologies, low carbon products, and low carbon goods. And that would significantly change the way we address the emissions. So that's the type of things that cities can put on the table as innovative approaches, and this could also help nations to address their emissions more appropriately.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe just one last question, that as we are talking about that how nations are addressing their global emissions and moving towards carbon credits. So as Indonesia is adding this new capital city, so how would the carbon credits work in this case? Maybe any insights on this?
We wished as ICLEI to position this new Jakarta or Nusantara as a very concrete example of a non-market approach. But I think at the moment we are not there yet. We had not received feedbacks from the national governments of Indonesia. But it's still not over. I think we can do this. And I see that there are colleagues from ESCAP who wants to respond to that. So at the moment, I'm not sure whether this is possible, but I'm eager to hear the response as well.
I don't have an answer, but Indonesia has been really host of a voluntary carbon market, so they have a really good experience, and so this non-market approach can be really built on their experience on and voluntary carbon market. That's one, and looking at Nusantara, so impact even core areas, they are going to preserve more than 50% of current ecosystem. So it's not completely, that's one point. And then one point is also, this is the core area will be built, is being built in the industrial forest area, so secondary forest. So that's a positive side, but still the building, new capital itself needed to destroy current, yes.
And in fact, this is exactly the type of traditional urban development does not consider climate as a priority.
Yeah,
Let's be realistic on that.
Yeah,
Ministers of Public Works, of course, their primary goal is to invest in infrastructure. But if they are connected to climate, and that's the reason why we are trying to bring ministers of urbanization and climate, both in UN Habitat and inside UNFCCC, is the fact these new developments, they can put a baseline about if this was a designed city of a current practice, that will be X amount of emissions and Y amount of losses because of this is not climate resilient. But if they can say that instead of this null practice, I am going to a cutting edge, the leapfrog to the highest standards of low carbon and high resilient development, obviously there may be some cost added, but there may be benefits. And the government of Jakarta and government of Nusantara or government of Indonesia can bring this as their contribution to the climate debate, which will be significantly important because this will avoid many lock-in effects. And that cannot be done by markets. It's really a government intervention. And therefore, the Indonesian government should be the champion of this kind of an investment and an approach for climate, innovative climate finance.
Thank you, Yunus, and thank you, Dr. Sangman. And I understand that this topic is of immense interest, and there can be numerous questions, and the discussion can go on and on. But in the interest of time, participants will try to answer your questions through email, those questions who have not been answered live. And I'm highly grateful to both the speakers who have joined us from diverse locations, Dr. Nam from Kathmandu, Nepal, and Mr. Yunus from Bonn. And thank you for taking your precious time out of your busy schedules. And also, as you have mentioned, Mr. Yunus, it's good to wrap up close the loop with you. So it's a great experience. And thank you, Dr. Nam, for sparing this time for us. Thank you all the participants, those who have joined online. And you can now see on the screen the survey feedback form as well. So you can fill up this form to receive the certificates, and also you can suggest for the webinar topics for the 2025 series. So we wrap up 2024 series here. And thank you, everyone, those who have made this series successful. And we wish to see you in 2025, and we'll come up with more diverse and more vibrant topics for everyone's interest. Thank you, all the panelists and all the participants. Thank you.